At the family gathering, my hands shook as I gripped the envelope containing the keys to my apartment. My parents had made it clear that tonight, I was expected to hand over everything I'd worked for to my younger sister, who had never held a steady job. The room was filled with 30 guests, their smiles polite but hollow, the kind that masked the thrill of watching a show unfold. And tonight, the show was meant to humiliate me. I stepped into the living room of the Whitmore estate, polished floors gleaming under chandeliers, the scent of expensive flowers and hors d'oeuvres thick in the air. Laughter bubbled from the center of the room, orchestrated and rehearsed, like actors on a stage. But I wasn't an actor. I was the audience, forced to watch my family applaud my own erasure. "Rose!" my mother called from behind the dessert table, her voice sugary, sharp, and dismissive all at once. "So glad you made it. Just place it over there." She waved at the envelope, pretending not to notice my tense fingers. My sister, Lindsay, leaned against the table in her sequin dress, laughing in that shrill way that demanded attention. Her boyfriend, Colin, whispered in her ear, and she swatted him playfully, diamond bracelet glittering in the chandelier's light. "You're tired, Rose," Mom said softly, as if she were offering advice instead of delivering judgment. "You work so hard. Maybe it's time to think about family. Help Lindsay get back on her feet. She's struggling, you know." The word struggling had always been the excuse for my sister's laziness, my parents' favoritism, and the quiet dismissal of my achievements. 4 years, I had climbed, stumbled, and succeeded, earning muted recognition followed by reminders to stay humble. Lindsay failed, stumbled, and faked effort, always rewarded with praise and handouts. I greeted relatives who had come to see the spectacle, the usual faces pretending to care about me while judging everything I did. Aunt Carla pinched my cheek, still treating me like a child. "Still single?" she asked, smirking. "Yes, Aunt Carla," I said evenly. Her husband, Uncle Frank, chuckled. "Maybe if you smiled more, dear. Men like warmth." I smiled politely, hiding the fire rising inside me. Across the room, Lindsay basked in compliments, the golden child, praised for nothing, forgiven for everything. The bitterness in my throat burned with every sip of champagne. Then Dad moved through the crowd like a seasoned politician, smiling, shaking hands, controlling every glance and conversation. His hand fell heavy on my shoulder. "Proud of your sister tonight?" he asked. I forced a polite nod. "Of course. You've done so well," he continued, leaning in. "And maybe it's time you shared that success. Family takes care of family." His tone was not a suggestion. It was a command wrapped in affection. I nodded as he walked away, the danger in his voice sharpening my pulse. Music swelled. Guests gathered for a toast, and I caught Lindsay's eyes. Nervous, perhaps guilty, but mostly thrilled. Then Dad grabbed the microphone. The feedback cut through the room like a knife. Conversation stopped mid-laugh, glasses hovering in midair. "We celebrate family generosity," he began, voice polished and proud, "and the bond that keeps us strong. Tonight, Rose has decided to hand over her apartment to her sister, Lindsay." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Some clapped out of shock, others because the patriarch said it was proper. My heart pounded. The envelope in my hand felt like lead. My mother's eyes dared me to obey. My father's grin said no choice existed. Something inside me broke. Years of muted resentment, quiet sacrifice, and being overlooked all collided at once. I set my champagne glass down. "No," I said, voice calm but sharp. The silence hit the room like a bomb. Dad blinked. "What?" "I'm not handing over my home," I said clearly, lifting my chin. "It's mine." A ripple of whispers cut through the crowd. Aunt Carla gasped. Uncle Frank muttered something about ingratitude. Lindsay's fake tears glistened in the chandelier light. Mom's face tightened. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed. I looked at her, steady. "I've supported this family for years. I paid for this party. The wine, the chef, everything. This is mine." Dad's smile vanished. His jaw tightened. "You defy me?" he asked, voice low but loud enough for everyone to hear. Before I could respond, his hand struck my cheek. Pain flared hot and sharp. My earring flew off, rolling across the polished floor. The room gasped in unison. Silence pressed down like a weight. I bent slightly, picked up the earring, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Lindsay." Then I walked out. Not running, walking deliberately, heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. The hallway was cooler, quieter, a space untouched by the fake laughter inside. I stopped by the grand window overlooking the city. Lights twinkled like indifferent stars. Somewhere in that skyline was my apartment, the one they had tried to take in public applause. I looked at my reflection. Calm, hard, untouchable. The storm inside me had gone still, replaced by something colder, sharper, resolve. I pulled out my phone. One tap. One number. Kayla. My oldest friend, the one who had always warned me about them. If they cross the line again, don't argue. Don't plead. Just call me. Some lines they cannot cross, she had said months ago. I had laughed. Now, her words echoed like a warning I was ready to enforce. 20 minutes later, a sleek black sedan arrived. Kayla stepped out, silver hair catching the lights, presence commanding. No words were needed. I nodded once, she nodded back. Inside, the laughter still drifted faintly from the ballroom. In 30 minutes, that would end. The doors opened, and Kayla walked in. Heels clicking like a metronome. Conversations froze. Eyes widened. "Richard Whitmore," she said, voice cutting through the room. "Explain why you struck your daughter." My father's face went pale. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what I should think," she interrupted, cane tapping the floor. "You demanded her property as if she were nothing. You humiliated her publicly. Everyone saw." I stepped forward, holding the earring. The pearl gleamed under the chandelier. "There it is," I said softly. Silence followed. Every eye was on the small object, proof of their cruelty. Dad's jaw twitched. Mom's hands trembled. Lindsay froze, her perfect image cracking. "You owe them nothing," Kayla said to me. "Take your things and leave." I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of years lift. "Thank you," I said. Obedience isn't respect. Silence isn't submission. By morning, the video had gone viral. Deals collapsed, charities withdrew, engagements dissolved. I didn't comment. The world had already said everything for me. Morning sunlight poured through my apartment windows, painting the floor gold. Kayla shook her head at the news. "They wanted attention," I said. "Now they have it." "Do you feel better?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not better. Just done." An email pinged. "All legal documents finalized. The estate is under your name. Rest now." I leaned back, silence settling around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, silence was not punishment, it was freedom. The day after the party, the world seemed to have shifted beneath my feet. Headlines, posts, and messages flooded every corner of my digital life. Daughter refuses to hand over penthouse. Grandmother intervenes at family party. Whitmore patriarch slaps daughter in viral outburst. Every platform had a version of the story, each one twisting the words to make my parents look monstrous, which frankly, they were. I sat in my penthouse, light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling beneath me like a map of everything I had earned. I held the pearl earring between my fingers, its cool surface a reminder of the night's triumph. And yet, my stomach churned, not from victory, but from the weight of what was to come. My parents wouldn't take this lightly. By mid-morning, emails and calls started trickling in from lawyers, accountants, and my father's business partners. Deals were being reconsidered, contracts delayed, investors questioning management decisions. My mother's charity board had already requested an emergency meeting. Lindsay, of course, had vanished, her phone going straight to voicemail, her boyfriend's texts ignored. Kayla perched on the edge of my sofa, her silver hair a striking contrast to the soft gray of the room. She sipped her coffee, eyes scanning the headlines on her tablet. "They're trending worldwide," she said, voice low, careful. "And not in a good way." "They wanted attention," I murmured, echoing my own thoughts from yesterday. "Now they have it." Kayla shook her head, but didn't argue. She knew better than to lecture. She had always been my anchor, my strategist in moments like this. "You're calm," she noted. "But they're planning something. You know that, right?" I leaned back, the city reflected in the glass behind her. "Let them. I'm ready." By noon, the first visitors arrived, lawyers and trustees, all carrying stacks of documents. They were here to ensure that every last detail of my grandmother's intervention was executed legally. It felt surreal. My grandmother, the same woman who had raised my father to be controlling and proud, had taken the decisive step I'd never dared hope for. "You're legally untouchable now," one of the attorneys said, handing me a copy of the finalized will and estate transfer papers. "Everything in your father's and mother's estate, including assets, properties, and accounts, is now in your name." I nodded, the weight of the documents in my hands grounding me. It wasn't about the money, it was about authority, control, respect. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic had flipped. Evening fell, and I decided to return to the site of the previous night's humiliation, the Whitmore estate. I wanted to see the aftermath firsthand. The driveway was quiet, the once polished grandeur now feeling hollow. I stepped inside, Kayla at my side, heels clicking against the marble floors that had once echoed with my parents' control. The house was eerily empty. The staff moved like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, whispers trailing in the air like secrets waiting to spill. I walked into the grand living room, imagining my father standing here, expecting obedience. Instead, it was silent. The chandeliers reflected light without warmth. "Rose," Kayla whispered. "They're here." From the staircase, my parents appeared, faces pale, expressions carefully constructed, trying to hide panic behind false composure. Lindsay lingered behind them, fidgeting with her bracelet, eyes wide. "You," my father began, his voice faltering. "You can't. This isn't final." "It is," I said, voice steady, calm. "The paperwork is signed, notarized, witnessed, legally binding. You're irrelevant in matters of my estate." Mom's hands trembled. "Rose, we just wanted to help you share." "Share," I repeated, the words slicing through the air. "You humiliated me publicly, threatened my autonomy, and struck me in front of your guests. That is not generosity. That is control. And control has consequences." My father's lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. There was nothing left to argue about. Not when the law, the witnesses, and the world's gaze had already condemned him. Then Lindsay spoke, voice small and brittle. "Rose, I didn't mean." I looked at her, eyes steady, unblinking. "You never have to. I owe you nothing. Every choice you made, every handout you received, was built on my effort. Your comfort has always come at my expense." Tears welled in her eyes, but there was no guilt strong enough to erase years of entitlement. I felt a pang of something. Remorse? No, it was clarity. I had been clear for too long. My silence, my compliance, had been mistaken for weakness. Now it was power. Kayla stepped forward. "Rose," she said quietly, "let's finalize the last part." I nodded. We moved to the study, where the final legal documents were laid out. Property transfers, accounts, trusts, and boards. Every asset that had ever been used to control or manipulate me was now completely mine. I signed, initialed, and sealed the final pieces. Each pen stroke was deliberate, precise, a symbolic undoing of years of oppression. Downstairs, my parents had retreated, whispering to each other like children caught in their own trap. Lindsay stood in the doorway, mouth slightly open, realization dawning. This was not just a loss of money. This was the erasure of the illusion of power they had always wielded. The night air was cool as I stepped outside, holding the finalized documents. Kayla and I walked toward the black sedan, the city lights reflecting on polished chrome. The estate behind us no longer held sway over me. Its walls, its chandeliers, its echoes of past humiliation, they were now just scenery. In the days that followed, my life returned to normal on the surface, but beneath it, everything had shifted. My parents' reputation crumbled. Their friends whispered, their colleagues avoided, and every network and contact they had relied upon questioned loyalty and ethics. Lindsay's engagement collapsed quietly, her confidence shattered. I, Rose Whitmore, sat in my penthouse, windows wide, city sprawling below. I held the pearl earring again, now a symbol, not of pain, but of triumph. I reflected on the ordeal and understood the truth. Revenge isn't always loud. It doesn't need to burn. It's quiet, deliberate, and precise. It's the careful placement of power back where it belongs, the restoration of dignity, the assertion of boundaries long ignored. Kayla knocked softly on my office door. "Dinner?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Yes. But first." I looked around the room, breathed deeply, and let the stillness sink in. This time, silence wasn't oppression. It was freedom. Evenings like this one, I realized, were rare. The city lights, once distant and indifferent, now mirrored my resolve. I had survived their attempts to strip me of everything. I had survived the humiliation, the strikes, the gaslighting, the public spectacle. And I had emerged untouchable. For the first time in years, I felt complete. Not because I had revenge, not because I had wealth, but because I had reclaimed myself. And in that reclamation, my parents' control evaporated. The lesson was clear. Power taken unjustly is fragile. Authority built on fear is temporary. The world sees what you allow it to see, and sometimes, the quietest actions resonate the loudest. I held the earring once more, fastening it carefully, looking at my reflection in the glass. Rose Whitmore was no longer a daughter to be commanded, no longer a victim to be humiliated. She was free. She was resolute. She was unstoppable. And if my parents ever forgot that lesson, I would make sure they remembered, without raising my voice, without striking a hand, without public spectacle. Because true power, like true revenge, is quiet, deliberate, and absolute. Moral lesson. This story reminds us that self-respect and boundaries are priceless. No one has the right to humiliate you, take what you've earned, or dictate your life, even if they are family. True power doesn't come from anger or revenge alone. It comes from standing firm, being deliberate, and reclaiming your dignity. When you face betrayal or manipulation, stay calm, plan carefully, and act with precision. You don't need to fight with their rules, because life has its own way of balancing justice. Most importantly, remember that walking away from toxic control is not weakness, it's courage, and sometimes the quietest, most calculated steps lead to the most profound victories.